Hellcat.
Hey guys, welcome to week 2 of Matt Chats. I am here with my colleague, Colleen Ehrke. She works at Huddle. She's our HR business partner for our competitive sales team. Absolutely adore her. I don't think I found an HR partner that I've actually enjoyed or loved talking to as much as I do her. So, Colleen, welcome today.
Thank you.
I greatly appreciate you jumping on this. Of course, today's mission is that we're going to bridge the gap between HR and then enablement and how those two teams can actually work together. So, before we jump into all of that, would you mind just doing a quick intro of yourself and then a little bit of background about you?
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Matt, for having me on the call. I'm excited to be here and to chat with you about enablement. So as you mentioned, my name's Colleen Ehrke. I'm a senior HR business partner here at Huddle. So a little bit about me. I have a bachelor's degree and an MBA from the University of Nebraska. I've been practicing and working in HR for about 8 years. I have a PHR and SPA or SHRM CP certification. My past experience, work life, I initially started working at large global Fortune 500 companies before transitioning into smaller startup and scaling companies. It's really interesting to see the transition from working with a very mature company and then pivoting to how do we build into that mature company. So that's something I find exciting. Here at Huddle, in my senior HRBP role, I primarily focus on designing and executing HR programs focused on performance, engagement, and retention of our Huddlies. So that could include performance development, performance improvement, org design. We heavily focus on engagement and how that can impact our culture, both positively, negatively, and then finally coaching and advising our business leaders on HR policy, best practices, processes. Here at Huddle, as Matt mentioned, I do support our US competitive sales team. I also help and support our customer success teams, our revenue operations and enablement team, and then finally our support and implementation team. So overall, it's about 350 Huddlies, which are quite a few, but it totals just about $120 million in revenue. So it's a big portion of our company, but it's exciting, it's fast, it's thriving. And you've probably heard me mention Huddlies. So that is what we call our employees. So I know at Target they say associates, or other places they say team members. So if you hear me reference Huddlies, I'm just referring to our employees.
That's awesome, Colleen. Yeah, I don't think I could have done a better intro, especially for us, for Huddle itself. So that's awesome. So I know you and I have worked on projects here and there, and we've kind of tag teamed a couple different things as we have developed this relationship over the last year. So as an outside stakeholder, how do you currently work, or how would you currently prefer to work with an enablement partner from an HR perspective?
Yep. Good question. So right now, I know I briefly mentioned it. We have really two main focuses for how I partner with enablement. So one of them being engagement, and then the other being more learning and onboarding with our sales teams. So first with engagement, from my side of things, we have our exit interview process. So essentially, high level, we give everyone who departs Huddle an exit survey. Within that survey, they're asked 2 questions that directly relate to enablement, and we can get very explicit and direct feedback from them on. So the question, the first one is, I had the information I needed to do my job well. And then the second question is, I received the proper training in order to perform my job effectively. So we ask those questions. Huddlies who are departing get a scale of how they want to answer it, being anywhere from strongly disagree to strongly agree and everything in between. And then they do have the option to add comments. So we do perform an exit interview after the exit survey is completed, so we can really dive into why did you answer the question that way? What specific examples led you to answer it that way? So I know in a recent departure, someone had said, I learned how to generate this report 3 different ways. It just depended on who I asked. So in my mind, I took notes of, okay, is this a gap in efficiency? Should we change our process? Is this something with onboarding? So we get that information very directly, and Huddlies are very explicit in providing feedback, which I really appreciate, and I know our enablement team appreciates it as well. One thing to think about with the exit interviews and exit surveys is that it's considered to be too late. These people are leaving us. So how do we get the information when they're actively present and actively working at Huddle? So Huddle actually released their first company-wide engagement survey this past February in 2020, right before almost everything changed in the world. So it was really interesting to survey everyone in the company. We got lots of really critical and impactful comments and feedback that we can proactively take action on to improve across a variety of different areas, including enablement. So in addition to the engagement survey, we also looked at employee satisfaction. It's directly related to how we can make these people more successful. If they're not satisfied, they're not going to care about what HR and enablement are doing to make them better at their jobs, to help with their selling. So that was another critical component that we asked. Retention is important. How does employee engagement and retention align? There is a direct correlation, and we want to get their feedback before it's too late so we can keep them here.
Yeah.
Also, I mentioned learning, so onboarding. So Huddle's a really unique company. I know, Matt, you went through it, I went through it, but Huddle has a awesome orientation and onboarding during your first week. So every Huddly gets to go through that. And then our sales Huddlies, after that first week, they're handed over to our enablement team, and then enablement dives right in with them. So during our engagement survey, we were able to identify some gaps between going through the company-wide onboarding and then the sales-specific onboarding. So these direct call-outs are really leading to positive results of, you know, I needed more insight on how to do X, Y, Z, or I heard about the same thing 6 times. It was overkill by the end of the week. So that's really helping us get granular and nitty gritty on how we can improve just that initial impression. Nowadays, and Matt, you can speak to it as well, people have so many options of where they can work, what they can do, and we have to stay competitive and we have to stay relevant. So getting the feedback and making adjustments as needed is really critical for staying relevant, being an employer of choice, and preparing our Huddlies to be as successful as they can be in their sales roles.
Yeah, and I love, Colleen, that you took that aspect of the engagement surveys, because personally, from a Huddly myself, having that engagement survey was huge. It was a way for us to actually express like the gratitude and the qualms that we're having with our own company. But you touched on a point there, is making sure that we talk to them before it's too late, before they're starting a job search, before they're starting to leave. So having that engagement survey to tie in with your sales team and working with your enablement team to really dive in and develop what those changes needed to be happen, I think that's a huge touch point. I think everybody should be doing engagement surveys, touch points. HR or not, find some way to do and track those.
Yep, I would agree. And if a listener is not doing an engagement survey, I would highly recommend it. I know it can take buy-in from senior leaders, but
right.
If you put it together and you commit to actioning on it, it will have positive impacts. We did it in February, and even with COVID, we've already seen a lot of positive changes, and it's just going to continue to build. And Matt, you might disagree, but I think everyone loves giving feedback, and we had it be anonymous. And so people were really blunt, and respectfully blunt is one of Huddle's core values. And we love giving them the opportunity to be respectfully blunt. And then on the flip side, one of our other values is we listen. So we listen to the feedback and we're actioning on it. And it's really seen some positive strides.
For sure. You also mentioned engagement as a critical area of a partnership between HR and enablement. Can you elaborate more on like what the actions that were taken to further develop that engagement level?
Yeah. So I know I mentioned 2 levels of engagement, the exit interviews, the engagement survey. So starting with the exit interviews. So as I previously mentioned, the information we gather during these conversations is often too late. It's shared once we gather it and I hear it, I share it with the appropriate stakeholders, but it's really hard to make changes that would impact the person who's leaving us in 3 days. And we don't necessarily know if others within the organization who are still here feel that same way. As you may imagine, there's always talking within organizations, between teams, between people. So you can infer and think that others might feel the same way, but the exit surveys and the exit information, it's really a positive tool that we use because we can look at other things that we can change on different fronts and within different areas. But for enablement, from an enablement perspective, it's sometimes a little too late. So one way we are combating gathering that late information is with the engagement survey. So like I mentioned, it was company-wide. But one thing we can do, and we are going to be doing, is we're going to be doing short pulse surveys. So 3 to 5 questions targeting directly to our sales departments of our processes, our procedures. Do you think our teams are working as effectively together as they can be? What's one area of training that would enable you to be a better sales rep? So is it time management? Is it negotiation skills? So those are things that we're really going to target in these pulse surveys. And I think that's going to be very informative of how we can continue to make positive changes and action on those to get those true changes. But ultimately, I think that enablement and HR need to be in constant communication of, you know what's happening sometimes behind the scenes on your end. I know what's happening behind the scenes on my end. If we come together, when we come together, it just creates very, very positive change and impactful change.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that pulse survey, like if you guys are not doing pulse surveys or engagement surveys or whatever it is, you need to survey your team. I find the pulse surveys as one of those opportunities for us to plan our quarters and what commitments that we're going to bring to the table and what we're actually going to focus on and work on in the upcoming sprints. So it's a good way for you to prioritize exactly what projects are coming across the board. So if you're not doing it, work with your HR teams, get that in there and start finding out what the needs of your own business are. I think that's huge, especially from an HR perspective. So Colleen, how do you plan the releases and updates that you have with your enablement partner? Like, how does it affect your strategy or the processes, you know, when your company goes through either a shift or a reorg or anything like that?
Yep. So we have, you know, hopefully as everyone does, we have our plans, but as you know, plans can change. There's pivots. Working in HR, we try to work in the Scrum mindset, but it can be very hard because things change on a minute by minute basis, hour by hour, breath by breath. So in theory, it's a good framework to have, and we try to use it for our projects, but some of the day-to-day we can't do it. Company-wide, sales department-wide, best case scenario, we're not going through too many reorgs on a continuous basis. If we find ourselves going through reorg after reorg, then there might be some other fundamental issue that needs to be figured out before we do another reorg. But when these do happen, because they do, and we just went through one 5 months ago,
Nope.
HR and enablement need to be actively aligned to ensure our change management processes are followed to a T. We have everything aligned of, I know who's going where, you know who's going where, what do we need to make sure that they get the proper training, the documentation, everything in their tool belt to make them be successful. We had, I know Matt, you can attest to it, we've had a lot of changes, we've had a lot of shifts, we've had a lot of new hires, and ensuring that we can level up those people to get to the same level that we want them to be at and help them be successful is really critical. And sometimes that does take a partnership beyond just enablement and HR. Sometimes we have to loop in other stakeholders, but I would say we're probably the two primary owners of that initial success for the Headley.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. So I love this question because it's very ambiguous and very open. It's one of my favorite questions I ask everybody. But if you had a magic wand with no limitations and you could do anything that you want, what is one solution that you would bring to the table to ensure and tighten more of a collaborative relationship between HR and enablement?
That is a good question. And I wish I had a magic wand for a lot of things with no limitations.
Right?
Oh gosh. One thing I would bring to the table, I think right now for the enablement and HR relationship would just be to have almost a one-stop shop for information. Being on the HR side, I can see a lot of information that pretty much everyone in the company cannot see just based on the nature of my role. But as we continue to evolve, there's constant changes, whether it's someone moving a manager or a department or a role, someone's a new hire, someone's departing, and ensuring that the information I have is getting to the correct parties in the enablement team, in the revenue operations and the revenue systems team, the whole revenue team in general. That's something that I think I've seen a struggle at, and we're actively working to improve it. It's just hard because, you know, this person shouldn't have access to this, or this person shouldn't have access to that. And in our general form, we give those pieces of information. So we can't necessarily send it to those partners and those stakeholders. So we were combating that by developing some internal processes, but it's a lot of mental checklists of, okay, have I alerted this person? Yes, no, maybe. I find myself going back in Slack and scrolling through to see if I've alerted them of something. And if I haven't, I'm like, oh, FYI, this change is happening on this date. I want to make sure you are aware. So we're making big strides. It's a work in progress. I would be shocked if any company said that they're perfect at keeping those communication and those change lines open. But on the flip side, on the really positive side, we don't have that much turnover in sales compared to the industry standard. I know LinkedIn said that it's right about 34% is the average sales staff turnover. We are not close to that. So thankfully, we don't have too many of these situations that often. But on the flip side, that almost makes it harder because when we do have the situations, we have that mental checklist of, oh yeah, have I alerted Matt? Have I alerted Sammy? So it's I think in the big picture, it's a small problem, but it's almost one of those, if we could just check that off and get that taken care of, it would be a big efficiency improver. And we can move on to some bigger things, but that's step one. If we have to make sure that the right people know who's going to be in what role on what team with the right territory, the right quota, because otherwise we're not going to get them started, or the change is not going to be updated and they're not going to have the best experience possible.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. So any lessons that you would want to share as far as a way to simplify you as an HR partner's stakeholder involvement?
I would say don't be afraid to ask hard questions on why we do things a certain way. And that goes for any department asking any other department. I think people can get really set in their, oh, we've always done it this way mindset, or we've never taken the time to actually find a better solution that might make us more efficient. So yeah, you spend 2 hours figuring this out, but you're going to save 30 minutes a day for the rest of the year. Very, very much worth taking those 2 hours to invest in it. That's something I've learned coming to Huddle is people are not afraid to ask hard questions. And in turn, I have found myself asking hard questions. And I apologize to my friends and my family because I've taken it outside of my work life and kind of grilled them on asking some tough questions that I previously hadn't asked, but they're good questions. And you just want clarification and understanding as to why. A lot of times you can figure out, I ask a tough question to you and I'm not sure what's going on and you just help me gain understanding, or together we realize that there's a gap that needs to be rectified, or you just tell me how it is and I say, okay, that's how it is, and I move on and do what I need to do. So don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. It is easier said than done. Sometimes you just have to take that breath and ask it, and then take a deep breath after you ask it, because it may have been nerve-wracking for you, but don't be afraid to have the confidence to ask it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I love that. Colleen, I can't thank you enough. You seriously have been a rock star, HR guru in my eyes. Again, I have not worked with an HR partner that I've thoroughly been able to talk to and enjoy as much as you. So I appreciate that. Before we sign off today, is there anything else that you'd want to drop? Maybe some nuggets or any kind of wisdom that you want to share to the rest of the team before we sign off?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Matt, for having me on the podcast. I was thrilled when you asked me, and yeah, I love working with you and your team, and I know we're going to have many great positive changes coming down the pipeline.
Yeah.
For forever. But one thing, one other tidbit, one other nugget. I think one thing that I am continuing to research and then subsequently will implement, I think coaching has kind of a negative connotation to it, but in reality, coaching can be a really positive thing. And with enablement, coaching to improve and coaching to be a better salesperson, I do think it will require some additional stakeholders. At Huddle, it would probably include the learning and development team, or at other companies, anyone who handles any manager training. And it doesn't even have to be managers. I think individual contributors and just reps, account executives can be a part of the coaching experience too, because I'm learning from my peers. Matt, I would think you're probably learning from your peers. So let's give everyone the tools and the capabilities to be the best coach, whether it's upward feedback, downward feedback, side to side. I think it will really help level up our sales team when we do it with our sales team, but also anyone who goes down that path to strengthening their coaching abilities.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. This has been great. I love. Congrats on the podcast. This is episode 2. So
episode 2, yes.
Yeah, this is great.
Thank you, Colleen. Colleen Ehrke, guys, from Huddle. Of course, I had to have somebody from my team come over here. So, Colleen, especially, thank you so much, guys. Again, episode 2 of Matt Chats with HR with Colleen. Check out next week with Adam from Gong. He's going to talk to us about how we have sales and enablement working together. One of the biggest groups that we've always talked about. I've worked with Adam on several different projects. I met him a couple years ago. Awesome guy, great company. Love working with Adam. Colleen, thank you again. And everybody else, talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.